Hey everybody, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here or just stumbled upon us, my name is Paul and this is Two Bears Homestead. What we do here is we are documenting things that we're learning, things that we're doing, whether it's in the kitchen or out in the garden, in our limited space, because it's all in an effort to educate ourselves when we finally get to the place we want to homestead at. So we're doing what we can where we are, and you're along for the ride. Today we are doing a recipe that I found online and I tweaked because we're making GOYA black bean soup. Now, this is the stuff, we love this stuff. This stuff is great. And we eat it, put it over rice, make chicken and rice bowl, all that stuff. But so I decided I wanted to make that because we eat a lot of it and it's getting expensive. The supermarkets are ridiculous right now. So I wanted to do that for that reason. And also because I want to stock my pantry shelves up. Where we live, we get directly hit by Hurricane Ian last year. So I want to have my pantry stock going into the hurricane season. I did last year, it was great. I'm going a little bit further this year because I think it's important to have that self-reliance, but a little bit of resiliency in your pantry so you can eat if you're not able to secure or procure what you need. So today that's what we're doing. So follow along. I hope you like what you see. At the end of the video, I'm going to go over a cost breakdown of what I did and what I saved. I think you'll be interested in that. So please hit that like and subscribe button on the front side and we'll see you on the back side. But for now, let's get going. All right, here we go. And here we are, we have the ingredients ready to go. So this is a double batch. Now I'm getting this recipe from, I don't know if it's going to come up on the video there, but it's from the University of California Extension. Now there is one thing in this recipe that I don't agree with is the processing time. So for pints, it's saying to process for 60 minutes, and that's not true. We need to do the pints for at least 75 minutes. So I will be doing that. But essentially, the double of this recipe is 4 pounds of beans, which you saw me measure out, and they were rinsed out, put on the stove, brought to a boil, and they sat and hydrated for over an hour. So that is the quick method of hydrating the beans. You can do it overnight. I just don't like doing it overnight. I just don't trust it. So they are on the stove ready to go. And then 4 pounds of black beans. Then to that, we're going to have 4 cups of onions chopped, 2 cups of bell pepper, 12 tablespoons of chopped garlic. Seems like a lot, but it's what it calls for. So we're going to trust the recipe, trust the system. And then it also calls for 3 tablespoons of salt, and I'm using Redmond's real salt. And then it calls for 3 tablespoons of ground cumin and 2 tablespoons of dried oregano. The only deviation I'm doing is I'm adding 2 teaspoons of black pepper to it because I like a little bit more of a peppery flavor to it. And the recipe calls for water to use for the cooking liquid, I'm actually going to use my home canned chicken broth because I have a lot of it, and I think it'll be a nice flavor. It'll give it a little bit more of a home cooked flavor, if you will, and also a half a cup of apple cider vinegar. So that's the ingredients for my imitation Goya black bean soup. So we're going to get ourselves rolling. Here we go. The recipe says to add the garlic now during the saute. I think that it's entirely too early and the garlic might burn, so I'm going to hold off on the garlic a little bit. But it does say add the salt now, so that's exactly what we're going to do. I had to switch over to a larger pot because the beans are still swelling up. So we're getting ready to add the garlic now. Ooh, that's a lot of garlic. And 2 different batches of chicken bone broth. This one here, I dry roasted the bones and they gave a much darker, richer color to it, so that was interesting. Jar. And you've been boiling for 2 to 3 minutes. Recipe says 2 to 3 minutes. Get it off the burner. So that's what we're going to do. Off the burner we go. And folks, we have canned COPYCAT Goya black bean soup. So here is the one of the jars. I don't know if that's coming through in the video or not, but it came out perfect. I love it. I mean, except for the only real difference is I use colored pepper instead of green pepper, because I like, on the shelf, it's just nice looking on the shelf. But I think it came out perfect. There's the one takeaway for me in this recipe is that the recipe, or the canning instruction part of the recipe, said to fill the jar halfway. And this recipe had ham in it. And I didn't use the ham because I don't want ham in this, but, excuse me, I think that factored in the fact that there's going to be the ham in there and so forth, and the displacement and all that. So I think in the future, when I do this again, because I will probably, instead of 50%, go a little higher, maybe go up to like 60%, filling the jar up, because I did have some beans left over at the end of the processing. Now I saved those and I'll use them another time, but at the end of the day, I think, the ratio was a little off because I just, took the ham out. So, something learned there. Now the other thing is, and I've got the recipe in front of me, is this is from the University of California Master Food Preserver Program. And this recipe, there's one thing I didn't like in it, is the processing time was 60 minutes. Now when you're canning beans in pints, it's 75 minutes. Now the only thing I could think of that was different in the recipe that may have tested down to the 60 minutes is that they had vinegar in it. Now that doesn't make sense to me because, it's a density thing. The vinegar, it increased the acidity in the jar, but it doesn't increase the density. The heat still needs to penetrate the product, and it still needs to get to like almost 250 degrees and so forth. So I'm thinking the vinegar may have been a factor, but I'm not trusting 60 minutes for the beans. I went to the 75 because that's what I know, that's what I trust, so that's what I did. So, and I'm making this again, so I wanted to absolutely address that because that's important. And I think, there's a lot of rebel canning out there. I think it's important that we follow the guidelines because they're there for a reason. And, that's just how I feel about it. I mean, in your kitchen, your rules, but in my kitchen, I follow the guidelines. So it's got me through 50 years so far, so I think I'm going to stick with the guidelines. So, so I think I'll be definitely doing this again. The recipe, it didn't call for green pepper, but I just know that the GOYA, it doesn't have any red or yellow pepper in it. So I did use that because I just wanted the color. So that's that. So the soup, the GOYA soup, let me tell you something. This stuff is expensive, very expensive, and I can't imagine, like young families trying to stock their pantry. I mean, it's just, I buy it, and I knew how expensive it was, but it's still, it's like I'll admit to buying it less often. And because it really is ridiculously expensive for one item. So let's talk about that. So the GOYA black bean soup in Publix is $2.25 a can this week. And Walmart was $1.98. Bravo Supermarket, which is part of Key Foods, and they service the Latin market, is $1.79. I love Bravo. I go in there all the time. I think it's one of the best stores around. But it was $1.79 in Bravo. I mean, to the key demographic, it's still very expensive. And then I checked Amazon because I think it's important to, Amazon everybody uses, so I wanted to make sure I factored that in. Amazon was anywhere between about $1.75 and $2.50 a can, depending on the seller. So that's still really, really high. There's no savings from buying this from Amazon. You get more, but it's still, but it still comes out to be the same price per can. So that was stupendous. Now, how much did it cost me? And here we go. I used for this recipe 4 pounds. So 4 pounds of dry beans at $1.49 a pound. So it was $5.96. Now the onion was about $1.29 a pound. The pepper, which is ridiculously expensive. I mean, we grow peppers in Florida, but they're still super expensive here. And it was $1.98 for the pepper, for that amount of pepper. I did the math to that. And then the garlic was about $2. So I didn't factor in the spices. I didn't factor in my homemade chicken broth. And I didn't factor in the jars. So the jars I have on hand, so that's a non-cost for that. So to make this recipe was $11.23. $11.23 for 20 of these. So that breaks down to about 56 cents a jar. I mean, that's pretty stupendous. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. And 56 cents a jar, think about that. You know, $2.25, well, let's just call it $2, or 56 cents. Same thing. In my opinion, it's almost, or nearly the same. So it costs $11.23 to make it, and if I would have bought this, I'm going to use the Publix number. If I would have bought 20 jars of this from Publix, it would have cost me just over $45. $45 for one food item on my pantry shelf. That's crazy. That's just crazy to me. So I saved just a little over $33 by canning it myself. Now, yes, it did take time. Yes, I probably could factor in like the use of the electric, and I had the canner on the stove and I had the electric canner going. But it was, it's part of the hidden cost. But at the end of the day, 56 cents a jar for 20 jars on my shelf is a win, no matter how you slice it. I don't know how else to say that. It's important to me that I have all this stuff on the pantry shelf for several reasons. First and foremost, now I can eat more of this because, when you go food shopping, you start making decisions, even subconsciously, that, okay, I can spend $2.25 on this. Yeah, it's only $2. But when you start doing that a lot for different food items across the board, it starts adding up. And, it's not cheap. I can afford it. That's not the point. It's not cheap, and I don't want to afford that. I don't want to give my money to Publix and to Walmart when I can make it at home and buy and source the stuff cheaper. And the other reason is I want it on the pantry shelf for to be stocked. Part of this process of learning is getting the pantry stocked with the things we eat. That's important. That's important for me. It's important for you, and you can do it wherever you are, whether you're a homesteader or not. But you have to get the pantry stocked because, where I live, we're in hurricane zone. We got you couldn't have drawn a bullseye over where we live for Hurricane Ian if you. It was just a bullseye hit, and we were down. We were eating jarred canned foods cooked on the stovetop outside on the on the camp stove. We had no electricity. It was a rough few days. So having that stuff was great, and that's it validates it. But also, when you have the food on the shelf and you've slowly built up your stores, you can spend less going forward and still have an amount of food. There's no shame, there's no embarrassment in having a well-stocked pantry. I don't care who tells you, I don't care what you see on TV or on the internet or on, even on YouTube. It's okay to have a well-stocked pantry, and you should do it, and I encourage you to do it. I'm doing it, absolutely, for sure. And the other reason is, we don't know what's happening in the world. I'm not a fear monger, but there's just too many people saying the same thing. So I'm going to be prepared, and I encourage you to be prepared as well. That's kind of my take on that. So at the end of the day, this Goya black bean copycat recipe at 56 cents a can was an absolute win. So there you have it. We canned Goya black bean soup. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed some of the takeaways. Again, it was not a canning video, so I just wanted to kind of go over it. I'll type up the recipe and put it in the notes. It's pretty straightforward. It's like cook the beans, cook stuff, can it. It's embarrassingly simple, but it does take time. There is time involved in that, and that's something that you have to decide what it's worth to you. To me, it's worth it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Tell a friend about us. More importantly, share these videos on your social media. That's how you help us grow. We're trying to grow. We're getting a lot of great feedback from people. So I love sharing my experiences, and you saw some of those other videos when I rendered the tallow, and it was like, still in my head. It was like glitter. That tallow was everywhere. But I'm digressing. So I'm rambling. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your helping us out, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.